What do you do when you find dishes in a box in the basement that have been there for 30 years? We'll tell you today on Keeping You Organized. Well, today we have Kim Oser from needanotheryou.com. And Kim, welcome to Keeping You Organized. And where are you located?
Hi, John. Thanks for having me. I'm located in the Washington, D.C. area.
Okay, Washington, D.C. So let's start by talking about how your journey into professional organizing. I know you had some other careers before you got into professional organizing. Why don't you talk a little bit about how you actually got involved and why you got involved?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I think like most organizers, we did something before we started professional organizing. I think now people are actually learning that it's a career right out of college. But like most people, I was born organized, as I say. I was always the one who was going to my friends' houses and reorganizing their room, or my close friends cleaning out their mother's refrigerators and reorganizing everything so that things didn't spoil and everything. But my previous career prior to organizing was I was a pharmaceutical representative. And you know, within the pharmaceutical industry, it's very highly regulated, and you had to keep track of samples and promotional materials and all sorts of different things, and as well as reports. And I've been doing professional organizing 9.5 years now. And so everything was paper, and they also sent you a copy on the internet too.
Right.
And it took like about 15 minutes for it to download back then. And then people would print it out, even though they got a copy in the mail too. And what I found is that I was really meticulous in how I was organizing things. I was constantly rotating my stock, which I thought was expected. And I had everything filed and labeled and with tabs, and my reports all went into a binder that was tabbed. And my boss was riding with me, and he said, "Where did you get all this stuff, and how is it so organized?" And I said, "I created it. Isn't that what we're supposed to do?" He was like, "I've never seen anything like this before." So the industry was in an expansion phase, and so they were hiring lots of people, and they were coming out, and my boss was so impressed by my organizational skills that he had me spending time with each of the new representatives, getting them up to speed, because it was easier for my boss.
Right. When
my boss would go on a ride along with them, and everything was well organized, and they could share reports and look at them, and it made sense. It wasn't just paper. And it was easier for the reps because they actually felt like they had a handle on things, and they weren't just kind of grabbing what was ever nearby. So I started doing a lot more of that, and I'm sitting one day reading Real Simple magazine, and I read a quote from the then president of the National Association of Professional Organizers, and I went, "Oh, wait, there's this National Association of Professional Organizers?" And I thought, there's people as crazy as me? And I went online, and I found out that people do make money providing a service of organizing others, and that there was a chapter here in Washington, D.C. And I went to my first meeting in 2003. I stuck with my job for a year, and in 2004 I said, that's it. I left my job, and I hung out a shingle and got some clients.
That's great. Now, were your parents organized at all? I mean, or one of them of the two, or I mean, how did that work out? Or, you know, are people born with organizational skills, or can they learn them?
Well, two questions there. One, I think some people are born with organizational skills. I always say I was a math science person, so I was always a logic person. I find that there's like the right brain, left brain, and the more creative types I find have less desire for organization. So it's not so much that they may not have the skill, but they don't have the desire because they're creative and everything is something.
Well, isn't it cool to have a messy desk if you're an artist? I mean, you can't have a beautiful looking desk, because then you're not going to look very cool, are you?
I would imagine that it would show that you're not as creative if you didn't have a lot of things, and inspiration, I guess, is the word that the creative types like to use. But I find that organizational skills can be learned if you want to learn them. To your second question, were my parents organized? My father was my first client, and I was hired by my mother to organize my father. And her thought process was, which was a little bit morbid, was, if something happens to your father, I don't know where anything is.
Oh, boy.
So my first job, it was, I guess I would say it was like a unpaid internship, was working for my mother, organizing all the financial paperwork of my parents, so that if God forbid something should happen, my mother knew where to find things, or at least I'd be able to tell her where to find things. And that I find is one of the biggest challenges that people don't think about with organization is, in that case of emergency, where is everything and what do people need to know? Right. And have you communicated your wishes?
Now, do you miss your previous line of work, or do you just absolutely love organizing and so glad that those days are over?
I miss a couple things about it, like right now a gas card. That was really helpful. Company car was helpful too, but I'm okay. I got over that. But I don't miss the actual work just because I love what I do every day. And that was something that an early boss had said to us as a group when we were in that industry, was when you're getting dressed in the morning, if you don't feel good about what you're doing, you're in the wrong career.
Right. Now, you were one of the first professional organizers in like the Maryland, D.C. area, weren't you?
I was one of the, it was during expansion time. I was one of the first certified professional organizers.
Yeah, CPOs, right.
In 2010, when they announced when they announced their certification, I had the number of hours and the CEUs necessary to qualify. And so I put myself out there, did all the studying, did the research, combined all my hours, and sat for the test. It's actually a physical test. Like, people are like, what do you need to be certified? You need to take CEUs continually, even after you become certified. You need to do research on books, and you need to have a certain number of qualification hours, and then you sit for an exam. Now it's computer-based, but in 2010, it was a number 2 pencil proctored exam.
And if you didn't fill in the little circles perfectly, then you didn't get certified? Is that part of the...
Well, like every organizing conference, I felt like you were going to be judged if you went outside the line just a little bit. When you go to an organizing conference, you feel like you're being judged while you're checking in. How many bags does she have? Is there stuff hanging out? Does she know where her confirmation information is? So
now you've done a lot of stuff nationally too. I know, in fact, you have been involved. You were on the Oprah Show, weren't you, for a couple of episodes? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. The Oprah Show was actually taped locally here in my area. They did a 2-day episode on Inside the Lives of Hoarders, and there was a family in my area that was, like most hoarding cases, there was black mold, and there was, as I call them, undomesticated pets in the home, which is another word for critters. But, when you get into the mind of hoarders, they tend to think that they're undomesticated pets.
Yes.
So they were looking for some resources around here, so they contacted me, and you can only imagine when I listened to that voicemail. Hi, we're calling from the Oprah Winfrey Show.
Yeah.
What did she say?
Yeah, I'll return that one, right?
Did I just hit delete?
Oops.
Yeah, I was like, don't hit the wrong button. But yeah, so I helped them with getting some of the resources that they needed locally, and then I met with them. They were in a warehouse not far from my house, where they had a 10,000 square foot warehouse where they sold some of the belongings that was in the hoarder's home.
Oh my goodness! So they actually moved the stuff from the home into this warehouse to have a big sale? Oh yeah. Oh wow! Oh, that's neat.
Yeah. So there were signs up everywhere. I didn't see Oprah specifically, but there were signs up everywhere with disclaimers that, by entering this building, you could be shown on the Oprah Winfrey Show.
Oh, that's kind of neat. Yeah. Did that help give you a little buzz there locally too?
It did. Well, everyone was like, Oprah.
Yeah.
It would have been cool if I had been able to see her, and it just so happened that I was traveling when the show was aired. And the show was, when I was traveling when the show was filmed, as well as when the show was aired. But they did work for like 2 months within the home because they had to repair walls and all sorts of stuff, as well as the sale. And then they did the in-studio show taping. And I was out of town, so I couldn't even go to Chicago to see it.
So what you're saying is you didn't have lunch with Oprah, right?
I didn't have lunch with Oprah, but the funny thing is now is I'm friendly with the kid who had turned his parents in for hoarding.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we're going to take a real quick break here, and when we come back, I want to talk more about your practice, what you do there, and it's Kim Oser from needanotheryou.com. We'll be back in just a moment. Finally, there's a line of organizing products that let you file your documents upright in the same direction you print and read them. Introducing the Organized Up collection from Smead. Made from 100% recycled paper, these heavyweight vertical file folders are super durable, heavyweight, water-resistant folders that stand up to extensive use. With their handy dual tab, you can label the file for both vertical and horizontal use, perfect for desktops, backpacks, and file drawers. The Stack It 1-pocket folders and 3-pocket organizers are perfect for storing and transporting presentations and projects. The unique tuck flap secures documents in place when you're on the go. Store and transport the organized up folders, pocket folders, and organizers in the MO vertical file case. Made from a durable corrugate material, the MO vertical file case stands up to heavy use while maintaining a professional appearance. See organization from a whole new direction with the Organized Up collection from Smead, keeping you organized. We are back on Keeping You Organized, and joining us is Kim Oser from needanotheryou.com in Washington, D.C., and we just got done talking before the break about being involved in Oprah. Let's bring it a little bit more down to earth here. Let's talk about your your local practice. I know you do both virtual and local, but let's talk about some of the things you see out there in the Washington, D.C. area, maybe common organizing problems that people have. And it's probably not regional, but at least some of the things you see when you work with clients.
Okay. Well, with DC, we have a mix. DC can be a very transient area because people come in to work for the government or for one of the government contractors. So there's lots of moves. And we're actually becoming, which is quite scary, a more technology-based area. So a lot of the technology companies are opening up offices in the DC area. So we do have a lot of people that move to this area and don't necessarily want to unpack everything because they're not sure when the next move is going to happen. So one of my clients, when we were going through their home, and they had been in this home now 20 years, there was a box in the basement that said basement. And I said, do you know what's in the basement box that's in the basement? And she said, I think it might be the dishes from our first move, that the box went into the basement on the first move and we just moved it back to the basement on the second move.
Oh, wow.
And these dishes have been sitting in this box for like 30 years in this box marked basement because they thought that they would just take it to the basement on the next move. But we donated those real quickly.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people in the government jobs too, they're moving every 2 years or 2 to 3 years they get a new assignment. So a lot of people probably aren't even motivated to actually unpack, right? They just let's get the basics, but then they're probably missing out on a lot of things either that they want or keeping things they really shouldn't take. So when you deal with someone on a first appointment, what are some of the questions that you ask them, and how do you kind of assess or sum up the kind of person you're working with?
Well, that really depends on their situation, but I do a phone interview with clients. I do like a 20-minute phone interview with clients prior to actually going to their location. And I ask them, I speak to them before we set up the phone interview. The phone interview, one of my biggest principles in organizing is actually scheduling time. And that's kind of how I gauge prospective clients' commitment. So when they call me and they're interested in scheduling an organizing session, I first schedule a phone interview, a phone consultation with them, because if they're willing to knock out time in their schedule for the phone consultation, I feel like they're committed to making a change in their lives to doing the organizing.
Right.
So I schedule.
I was going to say, so seeing that people actually need to have the time management piece of it in addition to being willing to get the rest of it organized, right?
Right. So that's one of my biggest principles is you need to schedule the time to get organized like you do a doctor's appointment or you do an appointment with an accountant or whatever it might be, where you schedule an actual appointment in your calendar. Well, that's one of the first questions I ask people is, do you have a calendar?
How many do and how many don't typically?
More now with the smartphones.
Yeah.
But I would tell people, I was like, do you have a calendar? And then sometimes they wouldn't be truthful with me exactly at first. They don't want to seem like they're disorganized. So they would say to me, yeah, which, when you stammer like that, when you're asking that question, I kind of knew that the answer was, no, I don't have a calendar. And then at the end I was like, okay, did you put it down in your calendar? And they're like, I wrote it down on a piece of paper. I'm like, okay, well, transfer that to your calendar. They're like, I really don't have a calendar. So I try to get people to make a commitment to doing the organizing. And I find that you're not going to just say one day, oh, I'm just going to start organizing some stuff over here, or grab a stack of papers, unless you are really committed.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the idea of electronic versus physical, because now everyone, you say, has got smartphones, and do you see a trend, or as part of your consulting business, having to bring in the electronic piece of it, or is it still, all physical stuff? How do you kind of balance the two?
I think that I find it funny that there's like a contrast between the electronic and the paper, because you'd think with all the electronics that we're doing that we'd eliminate some of the paper. But what I find is that all the electronics that we're doing is a distraction, and we never handle our paper now.
Right.
So we get stacks of paper that we don't know what it is, and then we're busy on email and looking things up on the internet. We don't ever go to the paper that we have. Right. So I don't find that the paper part has gone away. I don't think the paper part will ever really truly go away, but I do find that people are more likely to go look something up on the computer,
right,
than they are to handle their paper. So I have been focusing a lot on the electronic management of the paper, so at least that way when you have stuff online, you know where it is, trying to get folks to do online bill paying. And it's kind of funny when I ask people about online bill paying, I say to them, would you be interested in paying your bills online? And they're like, I don't like having my banking on the computer. I'd rather go into the bank and give it to the teller. And I say, okay. They said, I don't trust the computers. Right. I said, okay, so tell me, you drive up to the bank, you park in the parking spot, you walk into the bank, you fill out the slips, you walk up to a teller, and what's the first thing that the teller does? They put my stuff in the computer. I said, okay, well, do you think that all of your information... I said, well, what happens if you go to another teller? Well, I guess their computers are linked.
Yeah.
So I said to them, I said, well, do you think that your information is just physically on that computer right there in that bank? And they're like, never thought about it. I said, well, if it is, you're in bigger trouble than if you did it from home. Because if something happens to that bank and those computers get destroyed, your information's gone. But that's all backed up. So when you're doing it from the home, you're using bank level security, same level security that they're using in the bank, but you're not having to make the trip to the bank.
Yeah. It's interesting, too, that I think with the advent of email and electronic, I think we're just processing more. I mean, the amount of paperwork really hasn't gone down that much. I think we're getting more communication. So you still have a bunch of paper. Now you have a bunch of electronic, too. So you actually probably have more, even though the amount of paper maybe hasn't really decreased that much. I don't know if that's scientific or not, but that's what it seems like to me. It seems like I still have an awful lot of paper to deal with. So,
yeah. I guess the nice thing is nowadays that you don't have to hold on to it as long because there is the electronic backup. So like your bank statements, you can PDF it and store it and get rid of the physical statement. The IRS will accept electronic documentation.
Yeah. Now let's talk about how you deal with a client where do you set up a system for them on how to process? I mean, of course, sometimes you got to come in and just clear the decks, right, and get everything kind of in a place. But what about the ongoing? How do you train them to stick with the system, I guess?
Well, that's the biggest part of remaining organized is maintenance. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of like, again, it goes back to the whole scheduling and the time management part of it is you have to actually make the time to do it because you're not going to just be like, oh, I'd rather not go out tonight. I'm going to sit and file my papers. So you actually have to plan the time to do it. And if you plan the time to do it on a regular basis, it's not a chore.
Right.
So I think that creating an effective filing system is the key to it so that it's easy to put things away and to retrieve them when you need them and to maintain them.
Yeah. Now, do you have a standard kind of system that you use, a filing system, or do you kind of have 2 or 3 different ones and based on the person, I think with this person I'm going to use colored folders, or with this person, I'm going to use alphabetical, or I mean, how do you kind of decide what kind of filing system to use?
I like colors. I like colors. I find that with ADD or ADHD clients, colors are fantastic because their eye goes right to it. And if everything's all the same, there's nothing to direct their eye right to it.
Right.
And I feel that if it works with an ADHD client, it's going to work even more fantastic with someone who doesn't have ADHD.
So what's kind of in the future for you? What are some goals you have for the next year, a couple of years? What do you want to do with your practice? What do you see some trends? Talk about the future.
Sure. What I found is I started out as a generalist, and I still basically am a generalist in terms of the types of organizing I do. I'll do anything from physical organizing. I focus on residential and small businesses. It's moving more towards small business because productivity is such a big buzzword now, and with the way that organizations are doing things differently now, they're making more with less, and they're trying to do more with less people and automate things. So I'm focusing a lot on technology. I'm doing some webinars on different ways to use technology as well as in-person presentations. I've spoke at the National Association of Professional Organizers Conference in April in New Orleans. I'm speaking at a conference here in Bethesda in October, and then I'm speaking in Toronto in October on using technology to help automate tasks so that you can be more productive. And so I'm trying to help organizations as well as individuals and residents to be more productive and automate things so that we don't forget about creating our free time. And that's the key. That's my goal when I work with a client, whether it's a business or whether it's a residence, is I want them to free up their time so that they can spend it doing the things that they enjoy and the time that doing the things that they love.
Great. Well, we're about out of time here. How can people get a hold of you? What's the best way for them to reach out to you, whether they're in your area or not? Because you do virtual consulting as well, right?
Yes, I do. The best way to reach me is probably through my website, which is www.needanotheryou, and it's spelled YOU.com. They can also contact me via email, which is kim@needanotheryou.com.
Great. And hopefully a lot of people will need another you, because it sounds like you're pretty good at this stuff. So thanks, Kim, for the time today, and hopefully we'll have a time to chat again, maybe on a future episode as well.
Perfect. Thanks so much, John.
Great. Kim Oser from needanotheryou.com here today on Keeping You Organized.